they didn't have a plane, and we didn't get here until like 1 in the morning. So I'm telling you that because if I kind of phase out for a minute, that's what's happening. But oh, is that seriously? Is that for me? Thank you, Prince. You're great. But that's a good example, kind of what I want to talk to you guys about today, because like American Airlines, that's the airline that I use. I have their miles. They've got great commercials. Their planes look nice. But you don't always get what you expect, right? That's what happens. I mean, has anyone ever had that with an employee? They have a great interview, their resume is perfect, and then you do a background screen and you find out that they belong to the mafia, something like that. And it's like, what just happened? Why didn't I know this person was this way? That's what we do. Sorry, I've got to use the clicker here. So that's the worst picture ever, by the way. That's super mean that they did that to me. So, I mean, this is kind of like why we do what we do. So, I mean, what we're trying to focus on here is we're trying to focus on two things. One is safety. We want the company to be protected. We want your employees to be protected. We want everyone to be in an environment where they don't need to worry about who's sitting next to them as much as possible. But we also want you to be successful, and that's defined in a couple of different ways. One is obviously speed, accuracy, trust, knowing that the data that you're getting is good. All those things matter, and we want to make sure that those things are happening. And all these people here that you see, all these verified first employees, that's their job. So let's just talk about a little bit more about us real quickly, and then I'm going to get into really the meat of this. But the difference really that we're trying to deliver here is software and service. So our software is really unusual. It's very unique. I can guarantee you there's nothing else like it in the industry, and it really guarantees success. In other words, you don't have to be an IT person to know how to use our software integrated with the PayMaster platform. And I'll show you that in a minute. And the service is really good too. I mean, we're 100% USA-based organization. All the customer support, the compliance, everything you really need to be successful is based here in the US, right here in Boise, Idaho. So what we're going to talk about today is 4 different pitfalls, 4 different things that can occur when you're hiring somebody, and things that you need to think about when you're doing background screens. So the first one is pitfall number 1, really not understanding who you need to screen. Sorry. And really, we try to address that with you guys when we provide the software that we give you. Like, we want to make that really easy to make that decision. But you want to do a couple things when you're thinking about who to screen. You want to create a sense of fairness and equality among the staff. In other words, you never want someone to say, well, what did they do for your background screen? Well, they did a drug test, they did a 7-year county criminal check, they checked me all the way back to kindergarten, and with another person, what they do for you, well, the extreme there would be they didn't do anything. They never background screened me at all. That's not fairness, and that can really create problems in the organization. So the real thing there is you really have to do the same exact screen for everybody that you hire for a specific position. You cannot deviate from that at all. If you do deviate from that, if you make a policy change, you need to be prepared to talk about that and make sure that it's, ideally in writing. You also need to screen at all levels. I mean, how many people have heard about the stories of CEOs getting fired? This has actually happened recently because their resume was incorrect. They didn't go to the college they said they went to. I mean, I kind of hear that and I go, really? How did that happen? But it's happened. You kind of wonder if, in those cases, they're not really doing any kind of screening or checking. They're just trusting that this person who's got a great reputation is what they say they are, right? So you have to watch out for that. So the bottom line in background, in not addressing through the screen, are really screening all staff can reduce risks. And think about it this way, to your employees. Again, who am I sitting next to? To your clients. I mean, here I am, really as a Verified First employee engaging with you all, and you don't know who I am, but Verified First does. Your property and your brand. And the last one, the brand, is really the most nebulous, right? It's a thing that I think is hardest to understand, but your brand is everything. How you're perceived in the marketplace is really addressed by your employees more than any marketing advertising that you'll ever do. If you think about it. The engagement that your employees have with your clients on a day-to-day basis is really what your brand is all about. Does that make sense? So pitfall number 2 is not addressing the EEOC guidelines. I'm sure you all are familiar with the EEOC. So EEOC, again, is about applying the same standards to everybody. It tells you you cannot consider arrests or convictions. You cannot consider arrests, only convictions. Has anybody ever gotten any data back on a background screen where it says someone has been arrested for something or charged with a crime? Right? So what do you do about that? How do you approach that when that happens? Can you say, I'm not going to hire this person when that occurs? Right? You can. So it's very important that as a background screening company, we really pay attention to that. We need to make sure that we really only give you the data that you can use. Seeing that someone's been arrested or charged puts you guys in a position that really is going to lead to litigation. Because why would I want to hire someone that's been charged with, I don't know, auto theft or, whatever? Why would I want to do that? But legally, I can't use that in my consideration. So that's what the EEOC says. The reality is we need to be able to manage through that. You need to eliminate policies that exclude people from employment based on any criminal record. So, again, just because I have a criminal record doesn't mean I necessarily am not eligible for the job. The EEOC that says that's not fair. I could have been charged and convicted with a crime when I was 17 years old, 18 years old, sorry. And as my employees always remind me, I'm 54 now, and which is really not cool that they do that. But that was a long time ago. I'm not saying I actually was convicted, by the way, when I was 18 of anything, but it wouldn't be really fair to consider that in my employment necessarily. So that, again, is something you have to be aware of around the EEOC. Your policy should be job related. So depending on what the job is, the standards you're going to have for an accountant or a CFO are going to be vastly different from the standards you have for maybe a salesperson or a customer support role or something like that. So make sure that your policies are consistent across the board for those positions. And then lastly, do not make any adverse action without considering the green factors. Do you guys know what the green factors are? You guys familiar with that? So the green factors is based on really a legal case that occurred several years ago. And the result of it was really a total bar on hiring based on any criminal activity is unlawful. In other words, you can't just say, like I just said, just because I did something unlawful doesn't mean that gives you the right not to hire me. That's, so if you haven't heard that before, think about that for a minute. That's kind of in a way, a scary statement. It leads us into this sort of vague, shady area where it's not black and white. Like the question that was asked before, and someone wanted a black and white answer. This does not exist. So you're using your judgment, and it's based on the nature and the gravity of the offense or the conduct. How serious was it on a scale of 1 to 10? And again, you have to understand that if you're making that call, like I was a mass murderer, I think that would be a 10, right? I hope that would be a 10. Or I stole bubble gum from a convenience store. Huh?
When you were 12.
So I have a story about that, but I'm not going to tell you about that right now. Yeah, when I was 12. So you have to look at that. And once you make that judgment, once you decide that this is how I'm going to decide these things, it has to be consistent every single time. You have to be able to defend that decision. The time that has passed since the offense. Again, if I did something 30 years ago, does it hold as much weight as something I did last month? And again, you have to make that judgment. It needs to be in your policies so that when you make these decisions, it is consistent every single time. Let's go back to a CEO, right? I mean, you may really want to hire this CEO. That is a super important decision to make. And this person may be perfect for your company. They may have all the stuff that you're looking for, but I'll just, this is kind of a silly example. I hope this isn't true, but that person may have something on their record that just happened a month ago. And typically you're not going to hire someone that has an occurrence like that. You have to be consistent, or else you're opening yourself to litigation because some lower position, someone got turned down for that position, same thing, and you decided not to hire them. So those are things you have to think about. Now, the nature of the position does matter, again. So for each position, you might have a different outlook. But again, I still think you need to be careful about how extreme that different outlook is. I do think that is something that you need to take into consideration. So when to screen? Is that something that you guys think about? Like, when should you do your background screens? So there's 2 times to do it, to consider, before or after the conditional job offer goes out. Right? Best practice is, in my opinion, is no screening before the offer. You should make the offer contingent upon the background screen. I think that's a pretty common practice these days. When the application takes place, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with ban the box and salary history laws. really, I mean, for me, the simple thing is you're really not supposed to ask about anymore, about criminal history. I mean, when I was a kid and you went and applied for jobs, there was a checkbox. Have you ever been convicted of a crime or something like that? And you had to check the box that said no. Really, that doesn't exist anymore. And don't ask about salary history. There are some laws in some states where you can provide pay ranges or ask about ranges, but really you shouldn't ask about what were you paid. Not in writing anyway. I mean, we all have those conversations when we're getting hired, but it's a little different from the process. So follow FCRA guidelines. So with every background screen, you should collect a disclosure and authorization form. Hopefully with the technology we have today, that's been made really easy. That really should just be part of your, whoever you're using for background screening, that should be part of their process, or those things are automated. And with authorization forms from state to state, those forms may vary. From screen to screen, those forms may vary. And your solution, whatever you use, should be able to deliver those things on an automated way so you don't need to think about it too much. Some simple examples, state of California, they're like the king of forms. There are so many additional forms you need to fill out in the state of California as opposed to other states when it comes to authorizations. Screen to screen, a good example is if you're doing a motor vehicle report, there are specific forms that need to be signed for that report. And sometimes even in states like the state of Washington, there's an additional form on top of that for motor vehicle reports. It's actually a unique form. So all those things need to be considered when you're doing background screens. You need to provide the required notices. Summary of rights. What are my rights as an individual? So there should be some kind of form in there that says, here are your rights under the FCRA. We want to make sure you know about it. Please check this box or sign here that says you've read this document. If you don't have that now, you should add it. Again, a good background screening solution should have that automatically put into the process. And the last one, and this is the one that really kind of blows my mind a little bit the most, is following adverse action procedures. So does everyone know what adverse action is? Can you raise your hand? So with adverse action, it is a requirement that if you're going to reject somebody for some of the reasons that we discussed before, you have your policies written out. You know what, for each job position, what is the right reason to reject somebody, the wrong reason to reject somebody. You've looked at the report that's now come in on them. You've adjudicated it based on your specific guidelines, and you're going to say, I don't think we're going to hire this person. So legally, you have to send them a letter that says, basically, I don't think we're going to hire you because we found something on your report. Here's the report. You have 7 days to claim that this information is incorrect. That's their legal right. I mean, how many people have gotten a credit report where the information is incorrect? Right? I mean, I have. My dad's stuff was all over my credit report a couple years ago. And I had to go through the process of correcting that. As a background screening company, we have the legal requirement to work with candidates if they feel those reports are incorrect. We have to fix them. And if they are indeed correct, we have to give that report back to you, and then you might have to change your decision based on what comes back. Is that a process that you guys are used to? Something that you guys do? Yeah? So I'll show you that a little bit more in action in a minute. But that's really super important, and it's really curious to me, like the number of meetings I've had over the last couple of years, how many people say they've never done adverse action.
Is the purpose of the adverse action to be to give opportunity to the person to look into the matter and see if there is any error that they can fix? Is that the purpose of that?
Yeah, so did you guys hear that question? Is the purpose of the adverse action to give the candidate the time, the opportunity to look into the matter and you know, let us know that the data is incorrect, and that's exactly what it's about. They have 7 days to do that. So just so you know, like for us, our policy is a report comes in, there's adverse information on there. We have 2 compliance officers look at that. So in other words, if you don't get your report right away, probably because we're looking at something. And we want to make sure that it's correct. We have 2 compliance officers look at it, double check it, make sure it's correct before we send it on. If it's not correct, we rip that data out. Now, that's at best a good solution. It's never going to be perfect. So it's absolutely vital that the candidate has a right to see all that information and do something about it. So the last pitfall is not using robust screening packages. This is really the one that drives me the nuts the most. And it's really our fault. It's our industry's fault that this happens. It's really not your fault. So the biggest problem that I see in regards to packages is it's what's called the National Criminal Database Check, or at least that's what we call it. It comes under a lot of different names, but it's basically a national, across-the-board check about, you know, my background. Over and over and over again, we see employers just using that check, and they think they're actually getting a lot of good information about the candidate, and they think that they're doing their job. The problem is with that check, for example, is it only captures 5% of the total information out there about anybody on average. So think about it this way. There's databases all over the place. All these counties and all these states are collecting data on people. They're putting it in those databases, and then slowly but surely they may report that up into these national databases. It could be that that database is 6 months to a year behind. It could be that certain counties or states are not reporting it accurately or at all. So you need to know what kind of products that you're using when it goes to background screening, and how accurate they are and how complete they are. And are you willing to put up with potentially missing some of that data? So the key is make sure you're building a thorough criminal history. Make sure you're looking at getting as close to the data as you can possibly get. So what I mean by that is now drill down from the national level to the state level to the county level. The county level is where the data is going to be the most accurate. That's where you're really going to find out about a candidate's background and criminal history. That's going to be the most up-to-date data.
Do you do city?
Say it again.
Do you do city search? The city has a police department, or just county?
Veronica, do we do city? Have you seen that? Yeah.
But when you say county, you mean the county we're all here in Palm Beach County, not if they were in Texas. That county, that would be national.
No, it's, I think I understand your question. So it depends on where I've lived, right?
Well, if we're here now, we're employing and we check out Palm Beach County for our day, but what if they live 20 years in Chicago? Does the nationwide hit that, or do you have to pick the county?
We still recommend that you choose that county.
So when they come up and it shows their name in Chicago, Illinois, then you want to do the county.
Yeah, the standard is at least go 7 years back. So if you go at least 7 years back and look at, you know, in today's world, like we're like more and more, we move around quite a bit. You know, the standard should be go 7 years back, and in any counties that, for example, I've lived in, you should check those counties. And there's mechanisms and things you can add into your packages that make that happen automatically. So you don't have to think about it too much, and just make sure you're setting your standards up correctly. And again, going back to like consistency, make sure you're doing it the same for every single employee that you hire. So your standard is, I'm going to go 7 years back. I'm going to look at every single county within that 7-year period. You need to do that for everybody. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Ian, to answer the question on city, basically all of these are what's driven into the court system.
Right.
So when the city of Boca Raton if they made an arrest, it'll be in the Palm Beach County clerk of the court records. And that's, so they're looking at it at the county level, but it captures all that municipal data also.
Right, in general, the reason I ask that question is because there are weird things in different states sometimes. Veronica's way smarter than I am. She knows about that stuff. But yeah, you're absolutely right. In general, I think that's absolutely how it works. So, so again, you also want to add additional searches based on role. Like again, an easy one. If you're hiring a driver, do an MVR check. Like make sure that they haven't had a DUI in the last month. Right? And even more importantly, for specific roles, do ongoing background checks. Again, a driver is an easy one to talk about. It's very, you know, it's sort of obvious. You know, you could hire me as a driver today. I could have a clean record. 2 months from now, I could have a DUI and you would never know about it, unless you consistently go back and check that MVR report or the MVR. So make sure you have policies in place and packages in place that could be repeated like that. Obviously, credit for bank tellers, anyone using money, handling money or credit card information. You want to make sure that you've added in screens for that. For C-level people or executives, you probably want to think about federal criminal and federal civil checks. Make sure they haven't been convicted of any white collar crimes. Things like that. And here's just an example of all the different types of background checks you can do. Now this is just some. We actually have well over 100 of them. There's a lot to choose from.
What is the level 2 that it requires fingerprints? Wouldn't that be like an overall nationwide type of background?
So here's my understanding about fingerprints. Fingerprints are great at telling you who's been charged with something. They don't necessarily tell you about convictions. So I'm not saying don't do fingerprinting. I don't think that there, again, in my opinion, there is no single thing like fingerprints or a national criminal check that's going to tell you everything you want to know about this candidate. It's really getting as close to the source of the data as you can get. That should be the rule of thumb. That makes sense? So if you just look through this, like, you know, different types of things. So healthcare. If you're hiring for healthcare workers, think about specific healthcare checks that you might want to do, especially around licensing. Drivers we've talked about. Credit and financial, employment credit reports, bankruptcy filings, things like that. For executives and C-level folks. So a lot of things to look at. Obviously, you know, we can help you out with those things. So the last thing I want to do here, guys, is I want to show you our integration and how it works. And the reason I want to show you this is because it applies to everything we just talked about. I think the hardest thing for people in your role is it's not necessarily knowing what I need to do. It's being able to do it easily so that you don't have to, it doesn't have to be a big hassle. So we've tried to provide a kind of solution that does that for you. Now, I've never used this computer, so hopefully this is going to work. So do you guys all recognize this page? Have you all used this? This is PayMaster's candidate page. So if you want to do background screening from, for example, for Thomas Danger here. All right, there's Thomas. And you want to do it from this page, and you want to do something that really speeds up your process. It's pretty simple. All you have to do is go to a store. So like our solution is based on extensions and plugins. All you have to do is go to a Firefox store, a Chrome store, a Microsoft store, Safari store, and download an app. So I'm going to go ahead and download this app, and we're going to hope this works. So I just searched for verified first. All right, there's our app. Add it to Chrome. Tell them I want the extension.
But you only do this once, or every time you leave?
Do it once. Hopefully the extension's been added. When I go back to PayMaster, I'm going to refresh the screen. Go back to applicants. Go look at Thomas Danger again. And there you are. You're now integrated. It's that simple. There's nothing, you don't need to do anything else. We give you a username and password so you can log in.
Tell us your password.
I do want to chime in. If you're not using the recruiting, if you're to go on the My Employees, employee information, and if you want to go to that other screen as well.
Hold on a second.
Or once you know your password.
You know it. That's weird. Go ahead and tell what you're going to tell.
Yeah, so where I'm going now is the My Employee employee information screen, and
So that's it. They've
yeah,
already-
and right when you're on the My Employee information screen, you have the verified first.
But you won't have that for applicants. So how do you?
You can have it on both places. It shows up on both places. So if you're using the recruiting,
No, but if they're not employed yet, they won't be in your system, so
Ah.
they won't be an
Yeah,
applicant.
so if they're not
You can't do it with applicants.
if they're not employed, up on the top right of the browser, there is the verified first logo. And once he's logged in, when you click that logo, it will break out a separate panel on the right side of the
And then
screen
you enter the info.
that you
Okay.
can do it.
So assuming-
And then does verified first bill you, or that's through PayMaster?
That's through verified first. Yep.
I have a question. Once you run it through the little check mark, are you then able to
Yes. Yeah, the question was if you use the check mark on the top right to verify someone, does it feed back into their employee file once they are hired? And it is based on a Social Security, so it will match it. When someone is searched and there's a record there, rather than that button saying verified first, it will tell you the status of what you can.
All right, sorry about that. So, so here you go. You've now logged in, and really all you have to do now in order to start an order is just click place a new order. And the one thing I want you to notice here, there's a couple of things that it does to really make your life a little easier and to speed up this process for you. So the first thing it does is going to grab all the data from the PayMaster platform. So it's going to grab, Thomas's first name, last name, email address, and everything else that you need. Now, the other thing that we do is we add a send invite option. So when you guys are doing background screens, how are you guys doing it today? Are you having someone come in and fill out an authorization form on a piece of paper? All right, so then you have to take that piece of paper and you either have to scan it or save it somewhere, and then you have to enter all the information manually for yourself. What you can do now with us is you can send an invite via email, and in a couple weeks, and I think this is really, really important, you'll be able to send a text. So the difference between an email and a text is that on average, emails are open within 24 hours, texts are open within 5 minutes. So essentially, if it matters to you, you're speeding up your process potentially by about a day when you do that. Anything you use in that regard should be mobile ready. In other words, as a candidate, I should be able to get the text on my phone, click on the link, and then continue with the process and sign the forms. You can do that with our solution. The candidate can sign everything from their phone. Now, that's especially important for generational job hires. In other words, if you're hiring millennials and below, this is kind of critical to your process. So all I have to do to really do this is just send an invite. So now the candidate is receiving everything that they need. Invite was sent Friday, November 2nd. If I want to resend this later on, I can do that if they don't respond. And notice that the button is now telling you that you're waiting on the applicant. If you want to, they don't respond, and for some reason you can withdraw it.
But how do they respond if it's a text you send?
It's what they get. I can't show it on you here because I've got to have an email address to open up. But what happens is the candidate gets a text or an email. It invites them to click on a link. All the authorization forms are there, and they're there automatically. And this goes back to making sure you're using the right forms. How do you know you're doing that? Well, our system looks at the state, looks at the screens, and it provides all the right forms to the candidate for them to sign and check off on. So you don't need to worry about that. So once they check off on those forms, the only thing that they need to fill out other than that is they need to put in their birth date and their social security number. That information does not exist from the page that you are using to hire the candidate. Now later on, if you're doing ongoing screening, I believe this is true, you can do that from the payroll platform, for example. Like let's say I want to do
An MVR.
yeah, an annual MVR or even annual background screens. The social security number and birth date should be in there. And you don't need to worry about that.
But is the text telling them to check their email? Missing that point.
There's a link.
No, they
There's a link
Oh.
There was a link on the email.
Okay.
on the text. On the text.
Oh, yes, on the text, same thing, yeah. It's literally just, it's the same message, and it just says, it's branded for the company, so if it's ABC Inc., the email, the logo for ABC Inc. is on the email, it's their colors, it's their message. Same thing with the text, and in both cases just saying, hey, we want to move forward with the hiring process, click here to do the background screen. Okay? A couple other things. So let me, I'm going to withdraw this invite. Go back to place a new order.
But in the case of somebody that is not an employee, then you will have to enter manually all the information of that particular person because it will not be populated from the payroll information because there is no payroll information, it's not an employee yet, but you want to do the background.
I think that's what Romeo was getting at, right? Like there's an onboarding portion to your solution?
Yeah.
Yeah, so during the onboarding process, that information has been inputted into the platform, and we're drawing that out of it.
So it would be still be in the system.
Right. Now there are cases, believe it or not, maybe you guys have run across this, but there are cases when the candidates have no email and they have no text, mobile phone number. So there are ways to get around that. Like we do have a manual process where you're putting in all that information for them. So you can still do that.
It was my understanding that when you send the invite, the candidate will also have the freedom to enter their information
They can enter it or they can correct it.
or correct it.
So she asked, basically, can they enter the information? Yes, they can. They're not locked out of it. It could be that they put in the wrong street address, or there's been some kind of fat finger situation where there's a misspelling. They can correct all that stuff as they move forward.
And it also integrates with Indeed.
It does. We integrate with Indeed.
Because one of the things that I was confused, and I'm glad Romeo is going to address it, is how do we get the data into Verified first? So, because we don't have the HCM piece of it. So it's just how do we get the candidate's information onto Verified first?
So that's really important. So the question was, so you're using Indeed right now?
Yes.
So you're it sounds like you're using Indeed as sort of like a mini ATS for you guys, like that. In other words, that's the solution you're working.
Yes.
So that's really important about our solution. Again, it will follow you from platform to platform. So if there are aspects that you're not using within PayMaster right now, but you're using something like an Indeed to start your hiring and maybe even your onboarding process. We integrate with over 100 platforms, so including things like Indeed, Monster. So it's pretty easy. Once you download the extension, any platform that we integrate with, we're going to show up, and your account will follow you from platform to platform. All right, so packages. We talked about packages and making sure you have the right packages. So for us, you can create your own packages. Again, really important. If you've got new job positions coming up, things you haven't done background screens for yet, you want to make sure that you've created those correct packages. You can do that from inside our solution just by clicking on boxes. So I can change these or add to these on the fly and save these packages. And there's a lot of them that we have in here, or that we can create. So actually, I'll go ahead and create a package by clicking on the cogwheel here, clicking on package, clicking on add a package. And then I'll name it. So let's say you're hiring for drivers again, easy, kind of like a easy one to get your head around. So what kind of screens do I want from that? Well, I want to do a Social Security trace. I do want to do a National Criminal Database. I definitely want to do at least one county criminal record. That should be a standard. And you can choose the counties that you want to do. So the question before was, well, we're here in Florida. You might decide, okay, I am just going to check like this county that we're in. That is an option, and that's a kind of like a money-saving option. Or you might just say, you know what, I'm just going to do a 7-year background check. But either way, you should have those. And then obviously you're going to want to do a motor vehicle check.
Now, can you set up the motor vehicle check to automatically repeat every year, or no?
The question is, can you set it up to repeat every year? That's coming.
Okay.
So the way we do that is we'll be looking at the date of the original check, and then we'll be automating like a reminder to tell you need to do it. And if you need to do batches of them, you'll be able to do it in batches. So we do that for motor vehicle checks. We do it, believe it or not, we volunteers. A lot of churches, for example, are screening volunteers, and they want to do that annually, things like that. So that stuff is coming out.
But if they're driving your company vehicle, your insurance company does it at renewal, all of your drivers anyways.
They do, yeah, the insurance company does, but they don't provide you with the information. So they'll tell you, like, well, yeah, we think they're fine, but you don't really, you don't know that. So all I have to do is save this, and there's the package. Again, for us, this is about it's about saving time, but it's also making it easy for you to stay compliant within the rules that you set for yourself. I mean, if you think about it, what are some of the things that get in your way? It's just really red tape, right? It's having to do things that are just sort of annoying, like calling a background screening company and say, I need a new package. And then say, great, we're going to build that for you. And then maybe 3-5 days later, they get back to you and let you know it's done. So we want to put all the control in your hands to be able to follow these policies and these rules and these guidelines so that you're in charge. That's really what this solution is all about. So anyway, I'm gonna end it there. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm going to go back to where you said on the job application, you are not allowed to ask someone if they've had a criminal arrest or a felony, or you are?
You're not allowed to ask them if they've been arrested. Well, I think it depends on the state, right? But it really, in most cases, you're not allowed to ask that anymore.
Only because my sister just went for a job in Waldo, in a huge medical industry, and that was a question on hers.
Was it here in Florida?
In Waldo. So yeah, so near Orlando.
As Waldo's a city?
Arrest, but no conviction, and they turned her down. And she's in her 50s, and it was 20 years ago.
Yeah,
And
I
it was
don't
on
know.
this huge, like Tenant, but it's not Tenant that owns a bunch of them.
So the laws in the state of Florida may be different,
Yeah.
or they may be misguided in their policies.
Right.
One of those two things are occurring.
I want to be on the same topic with her. You also mentioned about the salary as well. Does that also apply to some states?
It does. Like the state of New York, for example, has weird laws around what you can ask in terms of salary impact in their history. So you need just to be aware of the state, and it's two things. It's a state that the employer, the candidate resides in, and it's a state in which the job is occurring. Right? So you just need to be aware of what the laws in those states are.
I think Florida allows that because I worked for someone that did all the stuff through an attorney, and they would ask for a copy of the W-2 in order to pay them what they were asking for.
Really?
And she paid I'm not gonna say names, she paid an attorney and a counsel to do her hiring policy in like 5 years, but she would show their W-2.
I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not sure I'd want the job. That's weird.
So, quick question, if we, or we request credit checks, I know there's an inspection that we're required. Can you talk a little bit about how that, that inspection entails?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So the question is, if you do credit checks, we have to do an inspection on your facility or where those credit checks are taking place. So as a background screening company, or really what we call a CRA, a Consumer Reporting Agency, we are required to be compliant in a number of different ways. One of them is PCI compliance. PCI compliance, for those that don't know, really has to do with how you handle financial information. That includes things like Social Security numbers. We also have to be HIPAA compliant. That has to do with how you handle medical information. So, for example, like drug screening. Both of those things require two things. They require a technology that's secure and a work environment that's secure. So to do a credit check, we have to come by, take a look at your work environment. All we're looking for really is, are you doing these credit checks in your home with your kids running around and anyone can see your screen and now they have access to all the Social Security numbers? Or are you doing this in an office environment, closed door space, is it secure? I don't think we've had anyone ever fail that. I mean, I don't think we've ever had anyone doing this out of their house. It's always been an office environment that's secure and they've passed. There's a fee for that. It's like $85. But it's absolutely required.
And I just want to add, it's not Verified First that's conducting the inspection. It's actually the credit bureau.
Yeah.
So, like right now, ours are conducted through TransUnion, so they will be the ones going out to the inspection. And I know we probably love to see that specific.
Did you guys hear that? Someone say no? The inspection is actually done by the credit bureau, not by us. So we use TransUnion. They're the ones that really have the policy in place, and really they're the ones that we need to ensure that we're PC compliant too. There was another question, I think.
Well, you talked about that you're going to do when the timing of when you're going to actually do the investigation. I'm sure that I'm not the only one in this room that when you get an applicant, one of the first things you do is you Google the person, right? And what do you recommend in terms of that, or what information you get? Use of that information. It may just be you find the person with strange photos on Facebook or wherever it happens to be. What are your thoughts on that?
Did you guys hear that question? Like you Google somebody? I'm sure I've been Googled and Facebooked to death by people.
We just did it.
Yeah. What, you Googled me? Wow.
Not best practice.
I need to talk to HR.
It's not, I can give you an example why. Say someone had a criminal background for whatever reason, 10 years, it's all gone, you did a background check, it's all clean, then you Google it, that information is there from 20 years ago.
Mhm.
Do you, that's wrong.
Look, like this is one of those things, right? This is why we pull data out of the report, because there's certain things you just can't use to make hiring decisions.
Right.
You just can't do it. There has to be policies in place. So whatever you do, here's the thing I can tell you. Whatever you do, you better be consistent. You better be defensible in a court of law. And I'm not sure Googling somebody and finding out information that may or may not be correct. And here's the thing. Is it correct? You don't know. Now, the information that we give you has been vetted, right? We're allowing you to say that that's correct information. And I know what you're talking about. Like, my daughter's had coaches, my son has had coaches, and we've Googled them, and you find all these weird pictures, and they're doing strange things, and you just kind of wonder, who is this guy? But it's really, it's not something that you can publicly use as a reason to say I'm not going to hire them. In my opinion. Does that make sense? Was that the answer you were hoping for?
I think it's the answer we're all operating on.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Hopefully you got an idea of how everything works. If you have any questions for us, we're back in the corner here. Just come and talk to us and we'll be glad to help out.
Thank you so much.
So we learned a lot today about background checks, and we have stalkers in the room, Googling people. Awesome. So anyway, thank you again for your presentation. We're going to take a quick break here again while Stephanie, our next speaker, gets prepared to come up and wow y'all. One thing I want to share with you though first is I'm really proud to work for PayMaster. And not just because we have an incredible payroll system and we have people who really care about each and every one of you and what we do on a daily basis, but also the people that I work with as people outside of PayMaster. A lot of people spend a lot of time outside of work volunteering and giving back to the community. And Cindy, for example, is working with Big Heart Brigade out of North Palm Beach, and she has made it a labor of love to work with them every single year around the holidays to give back and help those in need. I know that Holly has spent a lot of time working with Children Diagnostic Center and working with kids that need help and need the assistance, and is able to raise money to help these kids out there. I personally am very involved with Special Olympics and Freedom Fighter Outdoors. My two passions are working with children with special needs and our veterans and giving back. Romeo, too many to list, would be here till tomorrow if I talked about all of the charitable contributions and all of the foundations he's involved with. So I just want to give you some insight to the fact that I know sometimes we talk on the phone and we deal with our clients and you know us as PayMaster, but I think it's important for all of us to get to know each other as people too, and I can say I'm very proud of the people that I work with. Oh, I forgot Prince. Prince keeps Tinder in business. Swipe right. No, anyway, is that an HR thing or something? Anyway, oh, he's off, so I can say whatever I want. So anyway, we're going to take a 10-minute break while Stephanie sets up, and we'll see y'all back here in a few minutes.